we're going to continue our series. We've been talking for the last couple weeks about forgiveness. We've been talking about bitterness. We've been talking about at places in our lives where we've been hurt, and how do we overcome that hurt or that pain? And I think one of the things we keep repeating is, how do we get past our hurt like we never were hurt? Right? And when you think about this is really the image of what Jesus did for us. His forgiveness was unreal. His love for us is unconditional. So tonight we're gonna kind of direct this, and it's gonna kind of change a little bit, but we're gonna kind of direct this more towards when there's family issues. Okay, when there's issues within our families, whether it be our marriages. So just get ready and hold on, all right? So if you have family, you've had problems. If you've been married, you've had problems, right? And that's the truth of it. So 1 Corinthians chapter 13, let's start right in verse 1. It says, "Though I speak with the tongues of men and of the angels and have not charity or love, I become a sounding brass or a tingling cymbal. And though I have the gift of prophecy and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and though I have all faith so that I could remove mountains and have not love or charity, I am nothing. And though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor and give my body to be burned and have not charity or love, it profiteth me nothing. Love suffereth long and is kind. Love envieth not. Love vaunteth not itself. It's not puffed up. Doeth not behave itself seemly. Love seeketh not her own. It's not easily provoked. Thinketh no evil." Think about that phrase. That true love doesn't even think evil of someone. Right? Then it goes on. It says, love rejoices not in sin or in wrong, but it rejoices in the truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, and it endures all things. Then verse 8, it says, "Charity or love never faileth." He says, "But whether there be prophecies, they shall fail. Whether there be tongues, they shall cease. Whether there be knowledge, it shall vanish away." So this passage, we use this often. You hear this at weddings. This is the famous wedding passage. And ultimately, if we were going to chalk this passage up, it would be like this. You could have every gift in the world, but if you don't know how to love, then you don't have the right gift. Right? None of them are worth what love is worth. Love is what matters. Kind of to backtrack a little bit and give you guys just a little bit of background on this. Deanna and I were married very young. We dated for 3 months before we were married. And, I'm not advertising, and I don't tell our kids, you should do it. It's amazing. You should just, but the truth is it worked. But, we had, we were not in the right situation. We were in sin, and we left. I tell this story. We decided I was going to go look at a college in Colorado where Dale and Jody lived, and Dale told on me that I had my girlfriend with me. And I don't know that he did, but I'm sure he did, because no one else would have. And that was the only one I had there. So he calls our dad and says, "Mike's got this girl up here, apparently," is what I'm hearing. He's never admitted this to me yet. But I'm convinced this is what it is. So if I'm wrong, then I'm wrong. But so my dad calls mysteriously Dale and goes, "Let me talk to Mike," and says, "You have that girl. She didn't have a name yet. What, you got that girl with you?" And what am I going to say? Because at this point, I'm 18, but I'm not completely dumb. I know Dale or Jody's told on me, or both. Okay? So then I go, "Yes, sir." And he says, "Make it right. Because if you got that girl up on a vacation with you, I know you ain't right." And I was like, okay. What I heard at 18 years old was, "Go get married, because you're living in sin." So the next morning, we went to a courthouse in Colorado and got married. And here we are 28 years later. All right?
You're welcome.
So, yeah. Finally! Hey, the message is over. Me and Dale need to go to the office. We're going to have a little chit chat. And he won't be working here. I need a maintenance man too. No, I'm just kidding. And so, we thought it was perfect when we first got married. Everybody thought their marriage was perfect, right? When you first get married. They're everything. You're never going to have problems. Everything's amazing and perfect. And, something else that's interesting about it is you don't think about the transitions you're going to face as you get older. And you get so excited to have kids, but with kids, it brings transitions in your relationship. Then when your kids, I can tell you this from experience, when your kids get into kindergarten, it changes things. And then you can't wait, your son, you want him to catch the football and go play high school football. And then he plays high school football. Then high school football ends, and then he graduates, and he marries some girl. She ain't got no name. And then that's a transition. And then they have kids, and it's a transition. And then your health isn't what it was when you were 18. And then there's a transition, and marriage is transition. That's a great definition for it. Because there's always ever-changing things, and that's why you hear people say this very often. I hear this in counseling. They go, I don't even know who this man is that I'm married. Because he's different from day one to year 28 or 18 or 15, and she's different because we've all went through different things and different transitions, whether it be in our marriage or not. And I often tell people this. I think that probably for the first 20 years of our marriage, I would tell people, this is with no arrogance meant, but I think we had a model marriage. I think that people literally would be jealous when they met us, when they seen the way our family was, the way we raised our family, the way everything was going together. And I got to tell you that Satan struck. And I know what it's like to have hell in your marriage. I also know if it ain't your marriage, if you're not married tonight, and or for whatever scenario, let me tell you this, I know what it's like to have hell in your family, because I have in-laws, and I have daughter-in-laws. And one thing about it, I ain't gonna ever sit in this pulpit and sugarcoat or play like my life's perfect, because I can tell you what happens is that is often the image of the people that are out there for the person up here. It's like we go home, and because I'm the pastor, and she's an amazing woman, and people in ministry get this little cliche. It's like they don't have problems. And what I learned early on is that you can front like you ain't got problems, but if you've been married any amount of time, you've had issues. If you have family members, you've got issues. If you have kids, you have issues. And it's just the reality of it is that it hurts worse in that scenario because it's the people you love. And so those issues in our home and with others, really we were in a point that was like a crisis, if I'm going to be honest with you. It's why I'm teaching this series, and it was a family crisis. And each day it brought new fights, right? And it affected our children. It affected the way that they looked at things for some time. And there were clashes, and some clashes are more disruptive than others, because people can say when you counsel somebody, the way that we're supposed to counsel, if you've ever been through seminary, is you're supposed to ask people, do you fight in front of your kids? Right? And here's the deal. We all probably have. But then, well, maybe not much, right? They'll say. People go, no. But I need you to hear this tonight if you're married. Let's do the marriage side of it for a minute. Your kids know if you fight, even if you don't do it in front of them. So whether you believe that or not, it's a fact. Because one, we don't give kids credit. They know when something's not right. Kids are smart. They feel it. They sense it. They know. But so I know our kids did this. And then what would happen is everybody was sad. So we were sad. And then there's times that there were words said that you could never take back. You see, so whenever there's conflict within our families, whether it's a marriage or whatnot, that's the deal. So every family has been there, or maybe you're there right now. I do believe this. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think family conflict is the worst. Because I have to be honest, I feel crippled when there's family issues. And I don't function well anywhere when the family feels apart. Like I don't feel whole. I don't feel at peace when I go to work and that's on my mind. am trying to sit in a pulpit and preach, and it's on my mind. When there's family issues, it's just there. It's conflicting, it hurts, it's deep, right? And I think about this, like at that point in our lives when we were going through that, all I really wanted was peace and harmony with the people that I loved the most, I cared about the most. That's what I wanted, right? And I wanted my home to be a place like that was filled with peace. You know, we talk about safe places, or I wanted my home to be that for my kids, that it was just peaceful. Like, you know, they go to school and there's going to be some knucklehead there, right? There's going to be some teacher they don't like, but when they come home, it should be a place of peace. Right? And we wanted that so bad. And I wanted my home to be a place filled with laughter that it used to be, but it wasn't for a while. Right? I wanted it to be a place where there was amazing memories and not that memory. Right? And so all these things were going on, but no home is immune to conflict. And we have conflict. I'm going to give you this. You ready? We have conflict because we're imperfect people trying to coexist with other imperfect people. You know, I say this verse a lot, and one of the biggest issues, with family, you know, crisis, or with marriage issues is this. Now, hear me out and get ready. You have made that person out to be the enemy, and you let Satan off the hook. Right? The Bible makes it clear. We preach this verse all the time. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers. Right? Against spiritual wickedness in high places. In other words, quit letting your husband's name, or quit letting your in-law's name, or quit letting your wife's name be the name that comes up when you think enemy or you think crisis. And remember this, that Satan's job from day one, go back to Genesis. What's the first thing he did? Try to divide and conquer. When he can cause families to ignore, when he can cause families to avoid, when he can cause that kind of thing, he's winning. And let me say, if you have kids, let me share this with you. You're teaching your kids how to let Satan in. Because it's actually the opposite is what's supposed to be happening, is we're supposed to go to them in love and address it. We're to fight for reconciliation. But often we, because we're very proud, whether you like it or not, it's the truth, we can't live in humility, so what we do is we begin to resist. And we're like, well, who's going to win this one? I mean, we've played this game. As much as I love her, as wonderful as we played this game, who could ignore each other the longest? Who's going to be the first to say sorry? And I'm not going to say I'm sorry, because I can guarantee this one, I'm not wrong on this one, and I'm not saying I'm sorry, so she better be the first one to do it. And when she tries to say sorry, I might even push back and go, you ain't really sorry, I couldn't hear it in your voice. Right? We play that little game. When I first met Deanna, it's not to criticize or pick at all, but I'll tell you this, I'm not an ignorer. To me, I'd rather do this. Let's throw some pots and pans at each other. Spit on me a little bit or something. You know, throw some milk at me. Do something. Just get mean with me and let's make up. Let's get it all out. That's my type of style of doing things. I just want to fight and kiss and make up. Her, you don't exist. It's not being me. I'm saying this is how. So I started to try to play that game back, and it's hard for somebody who's talkative. Right? That ignoring thing, it's like a nightmare situation. And again, I'm not picking, she's amazing, but I have to tell you this, so we all tried to learn how to play each other's game. And I want to be real with you, because I want to kind of set the stage of this. We're not, any of us, immune to Satan's attack. But you got to choose what you're going to do with it when there's a family crisis, when there's a marriage situation. Whether it's a situation with your kid or a spouse, right? But we have conflict because we are imperfect people. Please remember that. It takes two to tango. All right, some may not agree with that, but it's a fact, because you still have a choice of how you respond, even if they're wrong or even if they're right. Right? But we have conflict because we're imperfect people trying to coexist with other imperfect people. Right? It's been said that family provides us with the life's greatest joys, but you know the rest of that statement? Deepest sorrows. Because your family will make or break you. It can destroy you. It can hurt you. It can crush you. Your family can do that like no one else. A spouse, a child can do that like no one else. Your kids, if you haven't had it happen yet, give it a minute. Your kids will rip your souls out of your heart. They can. I promise you. Right? Yeah, I remember moving my son into his first house. Our family, you have to understand, is that my friend, you know who my kids' friends were? Us. My kids didn't really have any friends. We were okay with that. I remember moving my son into his first house, crying the whole way. I'm moving his couch up there. I'm crying because I'm like, how tonight am I getting this stupid? It's like, it felt like death. And I hear people say this at younger age. Now, hear me out. Maybe that's you and that's your style. It wasn't our style. I'm not criticizing you if you're one of those parents that go, when they're 18, they're out of here. Some of y'all are going to regret saying that. Some of y'all are like big hurry to get your kids out. You're like, oh, we're going to have so much fun. No, they just get more expensive. Now it's the mortgage you got to help cover. Now it's the car. It ain't a tooth fairy bill, baby. And then you got to worry now. Right now, you're just worried about if they're going to get a boyfriend one day or girlfriend one day or what they're going to. No. Wait till they're married and their marriage it feels like falling apart, and you can't. I'm going to tell you, they'll rip your soul out. Because it always hurts worse when it's your kids, but it also hurts when it's your spouse. It's in your home. Right? So they bring deepest sorrows. Conflict, when it goes unresolved, and this is where some of us are tonight. So just hear me out. I'm helping you. I want to help, and I want to walk you through this because this is some stuff we did to try to get through this stuff. When conflict isn't dealt with, all it does is harden your heart over time. It makes you more bitter. It makes you more angry. Right? And you will build walls up that were once bridges. So you have to be careful of that. Right? So again, Satan's strategy is to divide and conquer. Right? A house divided can't stand. So meanwhile, right, I go back to where we were. It started out of a church situation, but when I think about this, it's like the ministry was exploding at the time. Right? And I want you to think about this. If you're having any trials, here's what often happens. It comes off of victory. When there's great victory in your life, Satan hates that, and that's when he begins to attack. And then when he can get you fatigued, right? When Jesus comes off the 40 days of fasting, what does Satan immediately attacks him? When he can get you fatigued, now he's got you whooped. He gets you physically fatigued, gets you exhausted emotionally and spiritually, and then you become numb, and that's so dangerous. We're going to get into that in a minute. So we were experiencing all this stuff happening in ministry that looked really good, yet at home, it was ugly. Right? It can be difficult. I don't know if any of you have ever had to do this, to try to put on the face when things are falling apart. Right? Trying to stand in front of people, deliver the word of God when hell is at home. Right? And it's at times that you feel the weakest and most vulnerable. And I just want to share a few things with you tonight, and hopefully it'll be a blessing to you. I'm going to share just, like I said, maybe 4 or 5 encouraging things, okay? And take note of it. Hopefully it'll be a blessing to you guys. But let's turn to 2 Corinthians to start. 2 Corinthians chapter 12. 1 Corinthians chapter 12. All right, so here's the first one. You ready? The first thing I think that we discover is this, is that, and I think this is a crazy truth, and this is really important to get, is this. Number one, God is attracted to weakness. God is attracted to weakness. Okay, when we are empty vessels, He longs to fill us with grace, love, and goodness. But often we're not empty, and here's why. Because what's filling the bucket is pride. Right? So we lose track of God's goodness. We lose track of God's faithfulness. We lose track that God is on the throne. We lose track when we're going through these things that God is love and gracious. And I love this passage, 2 Corinthians chapter 12 and verses 9 and 10. And we've obviously, all of you have read this, but look at this. He says, and he said unto me, my grace is sufficient for thee. But I love this part. He says, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. right? So weakness isn't a bad thing. And often we look at weakness and we go, well, I'm just weak. I sat with 15, 16 kids today, and out of 15, 16, out of 12 or 13 of them are on depression medication at young ages in our school, and they're beat up, and you can see it on their face, the discouragement. One, her mother's at a place where they don't give her more than 6 months to live. She's sitting here in our school. The other one is over here. She stands up. She says today, I'm in my third foster home. The other one stands up and says, my mom makes a joke about dying, and it kills me because her mom's trying to cover her pain by saying it's like making a joke about it, but it's killing her little 14-year-old daughter. The other one stands up and says, my mom and dad had there was a situation where mom accused dad of this, and now my whole family, and I'm having to choose and pick. They're divorced, and I'm having to choose and pick between mom and dad, and who's this and and there's all this stuff going on in little kids' lives, right? And it's hard for me, stand up here as a grown man to say this to them. Well, God likes your weakness, but He does. Because let me share with you what weakness does. When you feel like you can't go on, whether it be in your marriage, whether it be in this family crisis, you're right where God wants you, because what you're learning, if you don't learn it, it's going to be a miserable road. But if you can learn this, He's showing you that you need Him. That's why weakness is beautiful. Weakness is beautiful because you're like, I am getting in a place of desperation that I know I need Him. I've done everything I can. I hear people say it, and I don't want you to take this wrong, but I hear people go like this all the time. I heard this in the last 2 weeks, 12, 15 times from the same people as this. We just got to get counseling. We just got to get counseling. Let me share with you something. If you're not weak, counseling won't work. And I'm not saying that counseling is wrong. So don't get up, go home to somebody and go, that pastor thinks that you shouldn't even get counseling from people. And the Bible says you're supposed to get counsel from godly people. I'm not saying don't get counseling. What I'm saying is this. Counseling ain't going to do you a lick of good if there's a family crisis or a marriage issue if you ain't ready for it. Because if he's worth his weight in as a counselor, what he's going to tell you is this. You better get over you. You better love. You better have forgiving hearts. You better have mercy. You better fix this. You better quit talking to each other that way. I mean, counseling's not difficult, just so you know. You shouldn't have to have a degree to have it. You should just have a Bible. Because the only counsel you need is coming from this word. But you got to believe it. You got to be willing to receive it and act on it. But I hear that all the time. Well, I got to get counseling. I got to get counseling. But that you can see, but you're still playing the ignore game. You're still playing the avoid game. You ain't ready. No counselor's going to be telling you anything that you ain't already been told. So the reality is that what needs to happen is we get to a place where it hurts enough. Now, hear me out, right? It's like disciplining your child. I ain't going to tell you how to be a parent. I'm just telling you this. If what you discipline your kid with doesn't hurt them enough, they'll keep going back to it. Right? We don't like to talk about spanking kids. I remember spanking Javin. I believe in spanking your children. Whether you do or not, you have your right to do what you want. But Javin was a tough-willed, stubborn. He was the book Dobson wrote, like the stubborn-willed child or whatever the heck it was. And Javin was that kid. And I remember one time I laid it on Javin, and he looks at me and goes, "That didn't hurt." Let me tell you something. Let me tell you. Now it's like, well, I don't want to do this out of anger, but I need to put something on you that soap and water don't wash off, because you ain't catching it, Javin. You ain't but 50 pounds and you're 15. And, I don't believe in abuse and all this, but my point is this, right? It's just like this. Pay attention. If I go, well, Johnny, you stole, and here's what we're going to do. Your Xbox is gone for tonight. You've been sending naked pictures of yourself on your phone, Samantha. But here's the deal. Your phone is gone for, look at, I'm going to take away for 2 hours. That kid, and by the way, this happens. And then we wonder why the kid's taking pictures again because let me share it with you. What you did wasn't enough to make them think about what they did. And let me share something with you. You want to keep being arrogant and proud in your marriage or in your crisis, and God has bigger paddles. If you think where you're at today hurts, give him a couple minutes. Because the reality is this: he always has bigger paddles. But maybe that's a terrible illustration, but it's the reality of it all. Is this: is there comes a time, guys, there comes a time that if you're not willing to do what God tells you to do, if you're not willing to just obey God right where you are. Listen, I want to say this to you about a marriage. And I'm not telling you this like I know it all, because I don't. I'm just telling you this. If you're not loving her like you should, do it. Because if you don't, you're going to pay a price. And it can come at the hand of her, but much greater can come at the hand of God. God loves it when we're weak enough to go like this: I can't. I don't know how to deal with this situation with my kids. I don't know how to deal with the situation with my spouse. I don't know how to deal with this health situation. I don't know how to deal with this crisis. I don't know how to deal with this thorn in the side. I don't know how to deal with all this stuff, that drama that's going on. I don't know how to deal with it. He loves that, because what we're doing at that point, there has to come a point, is that we relinquish power to God and say, God, I can't. And he says, when you are weak, I'm strong. I think God's stronger than us. And he says, when you're weak, I'm strong. So there comes a point that we got to go, okay. He says further on in this verse, he says, most gladly, therefore, will I rather glory in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. In other words, this: when I'm not in that obedience to God, when I'm not obeying God, when I'm not being sufficient, when I'm not